Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the New ID podcast. I am your host, Kuda Mic, and I'm joined here tonight by James Abraham, CEO of MindRight, here to talk all things mental health as part of our nuMind series. James, how are we doing today, bro?
I'm doing very well, Kuda. I'm doing very well. The heat's been a killer, but otherwise I am doing well. How about you, brother?
I am good. I would take your heat any day, bro. This colder weather is not for me, bro.
Hey, but Kuda, what do you want to talk about?
Something that's been, I've low-key been avoiding this one in the list because I think there's so much more I can expose myself to about this, but it's worth the conversation. The topic for the day is body positivity. And I feel like that's a conversation that could be had in so many different ways. So I don't know, maybe I should start by just sharing what I recently saw as I was kind of doing a bit of research on this topic.
Okay.
So much of like polarizing content, just the worst conversations being had. And I feel like people forget sometimes that the internet is just the worst. You're literally getting people on extreme ends just vilifying each other.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like it doesn't even create an opportunity to understand, which I feel like is the key part missing in these two-way, they aren't even two-way. There's so much like out there, which I think is planting seeds for all sorts of, ways we could take this discussion. But where can we start when it comes to body positivity?
I think a good starting point for something called body positivity is to understand where that terminology comes from. So body positivity actually comes from two words, body dysmorphia and toxic positivity. Now, those are two negative things, and you may be misled into believing that body positivity is a super positive thing. And while it did start out that way, I think we're trending in the direction now that has taken it into a very toxic place, right? So if we break that word down, body positivity, the first word, body, I believe it comes from something called body dysmorphia, right? And that's a psychological disorder. Body dysmorphia is when there is something about your body that you find is imperfect. No matter what anybody tells you, you feel like it's imperfect. Now, it's very common. Not common for me personally. I have had a few cases where someone comes in and they're experiencing something called body dysmorphia. Now, generally it's on the face where it's the nose or the eyelids, lips, ears, where the person feels like no matter what they do, that part of their body is just imperfect, right? Now, the most famous example that we can reference for body dysmorphia is Michael Jackson. Now, I should caveat it by saying that there is
not even where I would have gone with that.
Yeah, but like I would now there's no real evidence because we don't have his psychological records that he did suffer from body dysmorphia, but we can deduce from how his nose kept getting sharper and sharper until it disappeared. And I am a Michael Jackson fan. So it pains me to say this, but he is someone who is likely someone who has suffered from body dysmorphia because no matter what he did to that nose, it never felt perfect for him, right? So that's what body dysmorphia is. Whatever you do to your body, that particular body part, it feels imperfect, right? Because it's through your own lens, and your lens, your perception, your feeling of it is that it is imperfect, right? So I have had a client come in where they're experiencing body dysmorphia with the ear. So no matter what they've done to their ear, they still feel like it's a weird, like sticking out kind of ear, like it's just an odd form of their body, right? And body dysmorphia comes from how they feel about it, And so that's the first half. The second half of that word, positivity, comes from something I believe called toxic positivity. Now, we're in a world where everybody says, think positive and good things will come to you. And, just always be positive. Don't let the bad things get you down. And while that can be true in doses, right? You should drink water because it's good for your body, but too much water, you drown. Same thing.
Literally. Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah.
positivity, toxic positivity is when you just ignore all the things that are negative in your life. Just completely ignore it, right? And you just go on this binge of just everything is awesome, everything's amazing. Again, a very, very, very good example is Ted Lasso on Apple TV. That's an amazing show that really highlights toxic positivity. And another reference is the Lego movie. Like, if you know the song "Everything is Awesome," and in that song, you notice where they're living that amazing life every day and it becomes mundane. And then when the main character starts to like question it, everybody around him is like, hey, why are you messing this up? Why are you going
man, we had a good thing going.
Yeah, because toxic positivity is when you don't acknowledge the bad things. Yeah. So that's what I want to try and create a foundation around, this language, body positivity, because I believe it should have been a very good thing. And I think it should have gone in a far better way than it's gone. But as you say, the internet sometimes polarizes, and unfortunately right now the toxic side is winning. So body positivity has now become such a negative term because it combines body dysmorphia with toxic positivity, and you end up in a situation where when you talk about body positivity, it's almost like you're accepting unhealthy behavior with the body.
Yeah. And that's how I see most of the conversation being framed up. I feel like people with the recent way that we've been trending in terms of people having more openness with like proclaiming what they believe and all of that and being empowered by the internet, you then find the opposite person going, well, you're promoting the exact opposite thing I believe. And sometimes it's just about, just the facts, for example. I bring that up just to kind of highlight the conversation around, could it be seen, body positivity in the toxic sense, could it be seen as glorifying things like obesity? We see these comments being made. We see things around, what else? Yeah,
absolutely.
I suppose you're essentially promoting an unhealthy lifestyle and stuff like that, you know what I mean? But when it comes down to it, I feel like something that I see in all of that, you touched on a little bit of self-image and self-esteem, because it's about how the individual feels. And there's nothing anyone really can do to help someone feel better about themselves. Is that kind of where that lands?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a shame that sometimes we confuse body positivity, or rather we confuse self-love and self-care with that toxic positive mindset, right? Because as you said, if someone's obese, That's not a debate that anyone's trying to have here. If you've led an unhealthy life and you eat whatever you want to eat and you don't do any form of exercise, you're going to have an unhealthy body. And like, there's like loads of these memes that trending around of people who had very unhealthy lifestyles who sort of promoted obesity, and then who have since unfortunately passed away. So I think it's really important to draw a line in the sand in terms of what is the difference between that sort of delusional way of thinking where, look, my body is not amazing, but that doesn't matter, I'm still going to carry on, versus I know my body isn't where it's supposed to be, but I'm still going to diet and I'm still going to exercise, I'm still going to do something about it. Self-love is acknowledging the bad stuff. The toxic positivity, the significant difference between toxic positivity and self-love is that within toxic positivity, you pretend nothing is wrong and everything is amazing and everything is awesome when it's not. And self-love is really towards people who acknowledge, hey, this isn't great, this isn't where I hoped it was going to be, but I'm ready to put in the work to make it better for myself because I know this is what I want for my life. And when we put all of those people together, we almost take away the power that those people who practice real self-love are trying to give themselves, because we're lumping them with the other people who are toxic positivity, who are practicing toxic positivity. So I think there's that distinction that is really important to make.
I have a couple of things I want to get to, but you touched on something that did trigger something in my mind when you said lumping in with the people who are trying to practice self-care and self-love, kind of getting lumped into the body positivity movement. And I feel like some of the arguments you hear do just that. They kind of like, well, you can't tell everyone, to just go work out because not everyone is like that. And I think it's fair to say, people have different metabolisms and different body structures and all that sort of stuff. But it really just comes down to acknowledging your reality and where you want to be, and kind of just having that, which in all honesty, a lot of my ideas around just doing me kind of keep me away from what the norm is, what the trend is, what's trending on social media. You're almost guaranteed to live a more peaceful life, at least in one's mind, when you avoid these really unnecessary toxic debates. Because like you said, sometimes facts are just facts. And you could be healthier, and then you're just backed up by the person who's like, love yourself the way you are. It's like, no. If you want to actually do something about it, do it. Don't just then kind of get lumped into but it's fine to be, no, it's fine for that person, and more power to them. But it shouldn't, it's often kind of pushed onto other people, which my thing is, just don't pay attention to it. Like, just don't log on to the platform that's, like hammering you with that sort of stuff. But that's easier said than done for some people.
Well, I think that's the problem, right? Because right at the basis, it's love yourself. Oh, okay. Love yourself. And
perfect timing.
Yeah, I agree. And when you can love, the problem is when you push that messaging of love yourself together with toxic positivity, that's where this polarizing effect happens. Because when you put those two messages together, it's almost like, well, if I'm not positive, does it mean I don't love myself? Or if I'm looking at my body going, I wish it was a little bit better, does that mean I don't love myself? So it's those types of questions that play into in a person's psyche that makes them question, like, I should celebrate my body, whatever shape and size I am. Yes, but you also have to acknowledge if it's unhealthy, right? There are different metrics that we can use, like the BMI, for example. Or there are so many metrics that you can go in and gauge whether your body is healthy, not healthy. And the problem is, as you get older, those things play bigger factors. Things like cholesterol, liver disease, stomach issues, heart disease, so many things that can influence your overall general health when you don't take care of your body. So I'm not saying like you have to go on a massive health bend and just like, pure vegetarian or whatever paleo diets there is and stuff like that, or don't enjoy a good pizza or fried chicken. I'm saying enjoy the stuff that you like in moderation, but also don't pretend like you don't need to put in work. There are personal trainers and there are people that are skilled at helping you. Go to those people, certified people, get them to help, lean on them for support, because don't confuse loving yourself with not acknowledging what needs to get better.
I love that. At risk of not getting to all these other topics that I really want to discuss, you just kind of planted a seed in my head. I think for those that do actively work out, there's some people you hear, it's like, man, I just work out all the time, but this is as far as it can go. Once again, there's probably some extra layers around what you're eating and all that sort of stuff. But if you're fine there, you're fine there. It's like I can get all the singing coaching I can possibly fit into my life, and I'll only ever get to a certain standard. I ain't gonna sing like, I don't even know who to put in this example, but my voice is only gonna get so far. So body type is also a factor in that.
Absolutely. And there are issues like thyroid issues that can play into whether a person loses or gains weight. There's so much that sometimes you just don't know that you're going through, right? Stress, a massive contributor for weight gain and weight loss in an extremely unhealthy sense. So as far as body positivity goes, the most important message is don't confuse loving yourself with not acknowledging what needs to happen to get your body into a better position to have a higher quality of living. That's the most important message that anybody can take from this, because I feel like people confuse loving yourself with accepting something is not wrong with your body when clearly there is something wrong, right? So that's sort of where I want to angle this sort of messaging as far as body positivity goes.
Whoa, man, learned a lot. I appreciate you bringing it down for us, because I have been accused of being toxic positivity manifest, and I can kind of see where the person would be coming from. And I had to make sure I checked myself before this conversation, just to make sure I didn't fall into that camp. Apparently, the level of self awareness I have, it's just enough not to be toxic positivity. So I'm gonna make sure that I take that back to the to your lady. Now,
Yeah.
moving on, I did want to find out what your thoughts are around how men and women experience body positivity differently.
Yeah, I think that's a fair question, because I do think we all experience it very differently. There's sometimes this narrative that only women experience the high pressures of looking good, or looking a certain way. Well, that's clearly not true. Don't tell me that you don't look at, a Chris Hemsworth, or when Thor took out his shirt in the first movie, or when Chris Evans, when he came out of that Captain
Becomes Captain
America
America.
machine. Yeah, come on, like Chris Evans was a little skinny guy, and he couldn't save the world,
Yeah.
and then he suddenly got all these big muscles, and now he can save the world. So
Yeah, well, he needed.
well, yeah. So it's not a message like, oh, men don't have standards to conform to. At the end of the day, one of the best things that I hear when I listen to actors who play these types of roles, and they are actors, and they try and make it known to people, like, before, like, they go on the scene, they're doing push-ups, they're dehydrating their bodies, they're going through a lot of work to make sure that scene looks good, because they're trying to make sure when they talk about it after, when they're promoting the movie, is to let you know, hey, it's not real. Like, one of my favorite actors at the moment is Zac Efron, because he talks about how painful it is to get that body and keep that body, and how unrealistic his body is when he was in that Baywatch movie and stuff, like, because he's just like, it's just not fun. And like, another very good example is Henry Cavill in The Witcher, that one scene where he comes out of the tub. And Henry Cavill's a charming British man. He talks about the fact that, he says this is very, in his British charming accent, he goes, I'm just not a pleasant person to be around in those moments, because I'm hungry, I'm thirsty, I'm dehydrated, and I haven't slept very well, because I've only had about a cup of water over the 2 days and a slice of apple. Because it's not a fun thing to go through. And I'm specifically talking about men who come out and talk about this, because sometimes the assumption is only women go through that. But I think both of us, men and women, go through those unrealistic standards, because men experience it, and then they're killing themselves to look a certain part, because they want to be like, they want to, especially if you're single, right? And then equally, I'm not saying that women don't do it. Women as well have a lot of beauty standards that they have to meet, because of all the standards that we see. And again, this is something that changes and evolves through time. If we look back in the era of Michelangelo, men were more feminine. They preferred rounder features. Go look at his artwork. Good-looking men were considered men who had rounder features. There are many, even till today, cultures where the belly is a sign of prosperity. Like in Singapore, you rub the Buddha's belly when you want good luck. So those are evolving standards, and it also depends very heavily on the type of culture you're in, and as women, about how much makeup you need to put on, and like, you walk into a Sephora, that place is like a jungle for makeup and what needs to go on your face and stuff like that. So men and women do experience different standards of body positivity, but it's also really similar. Not the same, but really similar. And we're judging people, unfortunately, on unrealistic standards that exist all across social media and different mediums. So it is different what men and women go through, but also kind of this, fairly similar. It's different, but similar.
You touched on something in there that I would really like to go back and unpack, how it's perceived or how it's seen through the cultural lens. Most African cultures, the wealthy, like the businessman has a bigger belly, and that's a sign of good living. You can feed his family and then some, all multiple lives. You know what I mean? So And also, please, I don't mean to generalize. All my people are not like this, but it's just one of those where it's just different. And some of these beauty standards are now being brought in from Western society and all of that. And I don't know if you have any other insight around how culture typically looks at body positivity.
I think with body positivity, it depends on which culture you are influenced by rather than coming from. Because if you are influenced by your own culture, because maybe there's a really large cultural emphasis, then your culture will influence how you view body positivity. So there are many cultures where a big belly doesn't mean anything. But there are also cultures where big bellies mean prosperity. And there are other cultures where big belly means unhealthy. Now, they're not exclusive of each other. So you can have a big belly, be prosperous, but also be unhealthy. You see what I mean? Like they can intersect with each other. And like, you know, when we were like growing up in Singapore, in Asia, the way you're built in Asia is just different from the way you're built, say, in Australia, or say over in Europe, or in the North Americas, or in Africa. So your influence of what is a nice body is heavily influenced by what is your culture, what is the culture that you feel most influenced by. Like if you grew up with like, you know, always watching action movies and stuff like that, your influence on body positivity is I got to look like an Adonis, right?
Yeah.
And for females, they have the pressure of looking like Athena. But if you grew up where there was a lot more acceptance of different body types and not judging people by their body types, then you're not overly hard pressed about trying to look a certain way. You're more concerned about, hey, am I healthy? And then as a byproduct of being healthy or eating, living a healthier lifestyle, you end up in better shape. And those people in general deal really well with components like stress, anxiety. They very rarely have eating disorders. They handle difficult situations a lot better because their lives are just a little bit more balanced because they're not out there chasing unrealistic standards. You out here trying to chase a Zac Efron body or a Scarlett Johansson.
Name any one of the top female rappers that come out looking exactly the same.
Precisely. And come on, like that's the thing. You're so, and the problem, unfortunately, is for females at least, is there are so many women who have plastic surgery and liposuction and injections and Botox and all these things that influence the standard of beauty, which is not real. But that's your influence. And it's, even though you know it's not real to the person, like we talked about, body dysmorphia, even though we know it's not real to that person, that's real. Thicker lips is real, right? A more defined nose is real. So even though we may feel, look, we know that's fake, the influence that it has on an individual is real. So that's what will motivate an individual to go get 237 plastic surgeries on their face to look like a Ken doll, or just as many to look like Barbie, because you're confusing self-love and body positivity with something that's incredibly toxic. And that's why I started by saying this body positivity is sort of taken a very dark turn where we begin to accept the unrealistic standards set out by all the various industries. And now we're so pulled. And so where the culture comes in is if your culture, especially now for the kids growing up, their culture is very heavily on social media. So that's their culture. And their culture, which means their influence because of that culture, is now, I need to look like that. I need to look like these unrealistic people on my social media who's got a ton of filters and who's got, various editing apps. And so culture influences how we view ourselves because of what we've been exposed to. And unfortunately for the present generation, they're exposed to everything and anything on social media. I'm not saying social media is bad. I'm saying you need to view social media with a lens that is informed, a lens that helps you recognize that the Avengers are not real. So the things that you see on social media, take it with a pinch of salt. It's not all real.
I like that. You kind of summed it up, but what do you reckon is the key takeaway? What do we do about it?
Most important thing is you have to recognize that whether it's body dysmorphia or whether it's toxic positivity, a lot of that begins with yourself. It's how you view yourself. Toxic positivity involves someone not acknowledging that bad stuff is happening. Now, you may sit there and argue that, oh, whoa, James, isn't that like pessimism, optimism, realism? Well, those are all ways of thinking. You are an optimist, you are a pessimist, you are a realist. Those are things that you cannot influence. You just are who you are. You can teach yourself to be more pessimistic, optimistic, or realistic, but those are thoughts. And thoughts aren't things you can control. They are just that they can be influenced. Your thought process can be influenced, but it's not something you can control. And when you go down the track of toxic positivity, you're almost ignoring the 40,000 plus negative thoughts in your head, because that's on average how many negative thoughts you have a day. They exist. You have to acknowledge that they are there. And when you acknowledge that they are there, then you can work through it. You cannot try and get over something or ignore something because they just add on. You need to work through those negative thoughts, because let me tell you something. I said there's 40,000 negative thoughts. There are approximately 10,000 positive thoughts that you experience every day. You have to work through the negative to get to the positive. On average, it's about 1 in 5 thoughts is positive. You get through the 4 negative ones, you get the positive one. So when you meet people who are just insanely positive, right? Maybe you don't notice it, but they are working through the negative thoughts. It's not that they don't exist. It's they've worked through those negative thoughts. So when you're dealing with body positivity, don't confuse accepting an unhealthy body with self-love, because you can still love yourself, but also acknowledge that, hey, I can do more to be a healthier person, because I want to mitigate the risk of heart failure. I want to mitigate the risk of high cholesterol, high blood pressure. I want to mitigate risk when I get older so I can truly enjoy the quality of living. And the only way I'm going to do that is to acknowledge, what am I not doing well now? Because when I can acknowledge those things now, then I get to a stage where life has more meaning, more purposeful. So as far as what people can do, I mean, we're almost like a broken recorder. We keep saying that you got to work on yourself, but I think it's self-esteem. You can only build your own self-esteem. If you're relying on likes and views, I don't know how much self-esteem you truly have, because you're depending on people liking your videos to feel good about yourself. What happens when those likes disappear?
Very good and simple question. And thanks for summing that up, man, because it really just boils down to the one simple fact. Every individual's got to work on themselves and do the work they need to get their mind right,
so that you can live a better life.
To the listeners, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the New ID podcast, where we tell stories from the community. We can't do any of this without your support, and we can't thank you enough. But to help us grow, please like, comment, and subscribe, and share it with everyone you know. Tune in next time for another incredible story from the community.